All right, well, I guess we can go ahead and get started then. So good morning or afternoon, everyone, and welcome to May I Ask a Question? This is a now annual project where Chris and I pick questions from Stack Overflow that are about Ember or Ember adjacent topics. We go through some of the best practices and reproduce whatever error or bug someone is trying to get through, and try to deliver an answer. So along the way, hopefully you'll learn some things about how to debug Ember, or maybe about some features you didn't know, as well as maybe a little bit about how you can help teach others to use Ember as well. Chris, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Um, yeah, the only other thing I'd say is that yes, we're going to be focusing on Ember because we're both part of the Ember learning team and framework team for yourself. But it's also just general problem solving. Like some of these questions, we've had a quick look through this morning and a bit yesterday, and some of these questions are just how to, you've come across a problem and it's how to boil it down to its simplest aspects and how to get past the bit that's holding you back. So what we're essentially doing, hopefully on stream live today, is trying to boil it down to the simplest question that they're trying to ask and then solving it for them, which is
Yep.
really hopefully transferable to whatever framework you want to use, or no framework at all, even if you want to do vanilla JavaScript these days.
That's a good point. All right, so just a little bit about us. As Chris mentioned, I'm on the Ember Learning team and the Ember core team. I'm an engineer at CardStack, and I've been using Ember for about 3 years at this point. I do quite a bit of writing, and I tend to focus more on kind of beginner, not quite beginner tasks even necessarily, but things that are more central to the core functionality of Ember, because a lot of things that you can build a lot with just knowing a small part of the API surface. And so if you learn that well and you internalize the mental model, you can get really far. You don't have to learn everything about a framework like Ember in order to be building some cool things.
Yeah, I completely agree with that sentiment. I would add to it in that when I was starting off building JavaScript single page applications, because I was using Ember, it kind of taught me a little bit of quite a lot of the things that you needed to know to build like quite an ambitious or quite a big application. So I didn't need to use everything all at once, but knowing what it provided kind of uh, help guide me through, if that makes sense. Uh, I'll do a quick introduction of who I am now as well, and then we can get started. My name's Chris
Sounds good.
Manson. I'm the one streaming, so hopefully some people watching might know who I am, but I am a developer at Simplabs, which is a European Ember consultancy. Um, and you're based in Boston, am I right? So we're
Yeah,
doing
that's right.
this across the world right now through the power of the internet, which is great. I'm also on the Ember learning team, and I have been using Ember now for 7 years, since December 2011. So whatever the maths there is, it's almost eight, which is
That's
insane.
a long time.
It's a long
Haha. And
time.
now you're real eight. You got to make jokes about that.
Oh, it's good.
All right, so should we jump in the questions here, um,
Okay,
and
yeah,
pick one
absolutely.
out?
So there's a few here just to kind of show what we're doing. So when on Stack Overflow can be a little bit challenging sometimes to actually find questions. This is just searching for the keyword Ember.js. It's not actually searching for the tag. If we wanted to search for the tag, we would put it in brackets like this, which is fun. Only learned that yesterday. And we're looking for questions that haven't yet had any answers. I had a look at this uh, last night and this morning, and I found a bunch of ones that we could try out. Do you have any preference of? I think I sent you a list of the ones. I think.
Yeah, you did. I'm partial to the one that says how to use computed properties And
Oh,
Ember
yeah.
3, I like that one. And I like, what was the other one? Let me pull up my list here. There was one, the link to that one's complicated. I would love to do the link to one, but that might be better as a not live stream to try and answer that one since it's about a Windows environment and we'd have to set up the VM.
So while we were getting ready to stream, I started a VM in the background.
Oh,
Um, so
wow. Okay.
we do have a Windows thing.
Yeah, I have
It'd be
one.
interesting
Okay.
to kind of so link to tag. It'd be interesting, like as you said earlier on, that one to me is like about problem solving. So
Mm-hmm.
even just recreating a lot of the time, even just recreating an issue that somebody has on a GitHub issue or anything, like verifying that it's still a problem can
Yeah.
sometimes be the hardest part of the battle.
Yep.
So it'd be interesting to just test it and see what happens. Um,
Right. Yeah, and I'm also interested from it in terms of like, is there actually a bug in this? Like um I think it's also a question of what version of Edge or Internet Explorer is
yeah.
also causing that problem because we're also lacking a little bit of detail there, but I think taking a look at it could be helpful.
Okay,
What
cool.
are you leaning towards?
So I quite like the computer property one to start off with.
It's like a
One of
quick
the
win
ones,
there.
yeah, so quick one. Then one that's kind of a uh, less quick win. It's this kind of talking about sending a post request from Ember to a specific URL. Like
Yeah.
even the first thing that we might do is edit the question just to make it slightly less a block of text because it's quite
Mm-hmm.
hard for me to follow that. Um, there has been an answer which is from this. I don't know if you noticed this, but he answered his own question, but he's linking to. Oh,
Oh.
no. He's linking to Ember 110
Oh.
guides, and he seems to be like brand new to Ember, new to full stack. So it doesn't sound
Oh.
like he's using a super legacy app. So
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
intervening here would be nice.
I started typing an answer to that one last night when we were looking at these, and I wanted to give it more time than I had at the moment. So, yeah, I like that one as well. I don't know. I
And
think
then there
maybe
was
let's
one
start
other
with.
one.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right. There's
So there
four
was
here.
so there was another one
Damn
that
it.
was data related. Data on a route not loading slash refetching. So this is the old problem of, oh, and it's been answered an hour ago, so live answers right now. This is the old
Ooh.
problem of people making changes to like an Ember data model
Mhm.
and then it automatically reflecting in the browser before they click save.
Yes. Yes.
So it's kind of a general gotcha. So yeah, I think even just tackling maybe even that one first, but even in this order. So we try the getter setter question, and we just have a quick look at an Ember app in Windows 11 and see if there's a bigger problem that we need to write a uh, an issue about, and then maybe taking a look at this fetching reloading. How does that sound?
Sure.
Okay,
I think it's
cool.
unlikely we'll get to the whole end, but let's try. Let's see. Let's
Absolutely.
go.
Okay, so before we start that, I tend to have let me have a look here. Atom. Command. There we go. I tend to have a test app. Oh,
Hmm.
open the wrong one. CD. What did I call it? Sandbox. Atom. There we go. This will be better. Here we go. So this is just a brand new initialized Ember app, um, so that we can test some of the things that uh, test NDTV. is asking about.
Which version is your sandbox app?
So I have done it as brand new, so whatever the latest version is.
It's 3.9. Okay.
Fee.
Cool.
3.9, yeah, I think so. So, yes, so it is 3.9. I might actually move that onto this side so we can actually see it if we need. So essentially I just use my little npm init Ember app, which is quite fun if you want an absolutely up-to-date one. And then Ember V. I don't know if people can see that in the background. I might need to
Very small.
Discord. I just had to. There
Yeah,
we go.
that's that.
Cool. Discord. I had to temporarily turn you off because the text is kind of behind you.
No. That's cool. Fine.
Okay,
I understand.
so the question is about using a computed property with getter and setter.
You
So
want to
I
zoom
don't.
in on this one as
Yeah, I'll
well?
zoom on this one too. Magic.
Blurry, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, I'll make it up a tiny bit bigger again. So it's talking about something changing between Ember 2x and Ember 3 when it comes to setting a computed property.
Mm.
I wonder if this is related to, so that somebody has responded, this was never supported because it will override the computed property.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right in saying that there was a deprecation added recently that kind of warns for this scenario where
Oh, like a
uh,
mending, maybe like a mending rule.
um,
Maybe. I can have a look. I didn't know of one, but um, give it a try setting up, the sample, like how you should actually do things. I can have a look through the deprecations. I'm also curious to like actually try this in Ember 2 because I didn't think it worked in Ember 2 either, but maybe it did. If they did, I think that was a bug. So,
well, I think it will work, but it will just stop it like it won't be computed anymore. It'll override the
yeah,
computed property and be
yeah,
um, like just a static value.
right.
Okay, so shall we start with a basic sample first?
Yep,
Start.
seems good.
So, most basic sample that I can think of, templates application. So we don't need the welcome page anymore. The basic example that people always tend to do is input, isn't it? Input. So this will be name, first name, input value equals first name, last name, input value equals last name, and then we have full name, fully, which will be a computed property. That sound good?
Sounds
Okay. Ember G. Ember G controller application. Make that a bit bigger as well. Oh, wrong one. Okay, so I'll make this bigger as well. So we now have a controller where we want to import computed from Ember Ember object.
hmm.
Just
I
if
like
anybody's curious, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say you're right. There is a deprecation, and I will post it in the chat here if we want to have a look. So um, it looks like the deprecation is that Ember's computed properties, you could override them, like you were saying, um, default if no setter is defined. And they note here that it was kind of prone to be buggy in the sense that people would do it and not really fully understand the implications of what they had done by setting the computed property. And so now they'll sort of be read only by default unless you create a setter. So
Oh,
anyway,
interesting.
yeah,
So,
which I mean, that's kind of what I mean, to me, that's the behavior that I think it's less, it's not as easy to stumble into making a mistake where you see your computer property and you like it's not computer property anymore after you've saved over top of it,
yeah,
unless you're using the setter. So,
what's interesting because this will be a, if it's a deprecation, then it'll, this is interesting. It means that we'll be able to demonstrate, because it was added in 3.8, we'll be able to demonstrate it,
yep,
what a deprecation looks like, how it kind of
yeah,
prints out in the console. And we can even try
yep,
the deprecation helper thingamajig as well.
yep.
Um,
And the important thing to note about deprecations is that deprecations, it's going to stay in Ember 3, because changing this behavior would be a breaking major change. So all the way through Ember 3, you could keep relying on, its previous behavior, and then whenever Ember 4 happens is when you can expect to not be able to do this anymore.
and this is kind of related to our, like Ember is very backwards compatible. Like we're very careful about how we make big changes for things so that people's apps don't suddenly break.
Yep,
Okay, so um, that's the deprecation. What I was showing on my screen, which I'll also throw on the chat as well, is um, the official documentation for computer properties, um, which uh, I kind of when I typed this out here, computed Ember object or whatever, I know it from memory because I've been using Ember for so many years at this stage. But uh, if you want to refer to how to actually do this, and I'm pretty sure it talks about getters and setters in here somewhere, then the Ember Guides is a very good resource for that. So full name is our computed property that depends on first name and last name. And the quintessential demo is return this dot first name. Ooh, I'll do it with a space between them. Magic. I don't even know what these things are called. Template strings or something? Oh, perfect. And this is running all well and good. We'll go and have a look at localhost 4200. Aha! Undefined, undefined. Interesting. I guess that means that we need to give it a starting last name. Starting values. So there's nothing in there now. And if we put in
yep,
a BR, we will be able to see, which is exactly what we want. Okay,
yep.
so that's the getting part of it. The setting part of it, what I'm going to do is create a button. that I'm not vain at all. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to put you in here. Uh, so I'm going to create an action called update full name, okay, which does exactly as it says in the TIM. So, oh, more BRs. Oh, my designer friend is going to hate me. He always hated when I put BRs all over the place.
I do that all the time in my code examples. What I really should do is just write some sort of padding class every time I'm about to start something, but whatever.
So this is
Okay.
what's happened. So we've just set the full name, but you can see it doesn't match these two things here anymore. And also, if I put in, you have like taken over, and it's no longer computing anything. And this is what we had here. The full name computed property is just overwritten, which is linking. Hopefully this will work. All the infrastructure is still up and running. I think I'm having a few network issues, so hopefully the stream is still running fine. There we go. So this is back to the thing that you linked me to a second ago.
Yep.
So this is the bad behavior. This is this, and what we were saying earlier on about upgrades. If you're running your app and you don't get any deprecation warnings, or if you don't get any deprecations in any of your tests, if your tests cover most of your app, then it'll be safe to upgrade to the latest major version if you're running on the second to last major version or minor version.
Right. So if you're on Ember 2.18 and you don't see any applications, you should be able to upgrade to Ember 3.
Awesome. So how do we fix this? How we fix this is we change
Well,
this
so
from being. Go ahead.
one thing I'm interested in this question as well is also they weren't using set in their example.
Oh, that's a very good point. So it's this first one. This .cp
right.
equals.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a very good point.
And that's why I was like, oh, did that ever work? And they're using an Ember too, but like why? I don't know. So if we didn't use set here, if we just did this name equals, what did we see?
What do we get? I really don't think this is going to work. I don't think it's going to do anything.
Yeah. Only has a getter. Yeah, interesting. I'm kind of tempted. Do I have an Ember 2 app hanging around? I'm
Well,
gonna pull up.
we could
You
initialize one.
Well, why don't you keep going with the answer to this one, and I'm
Okay,
gonna pull up an older version of Super Rentals, which is
cool.
the tutorial app used on the Ember website, and I will see what happens if I do that in like I don't know 2.18 maybe.
Okay, awesome. Right, so where are we? We are setting full name, and what we're doing, instead of this just being a function, we're going to pass it in an object that has two functions, get and set. It's an object, so it needs one of these commas, set. Now, what we had before is just a normal function is essentially the getter. I'm going to throw, no, console.error not implemented. So now we're going to see a different behavior. What we're going to see is that the getters is still going to work. Chris Manson, but the setter isn't going to work. Interesting. I'm curious that it didn't return anything there, or it didn't. It kind of cleared it. That's a bit strange. But this is the point. We've executed this function, and what we want to do here, value. Let me just check what it gives you. I think it might give you the old value and the new value. So let me. Oh, why am I doing it inside a console log? Oopsie. Old value, new value.
So I
Okay.
like this question as well because I didn't know that you could define a setter on a computer property for about 2 years of using Ember. I just never, I'm sure my eyes went over the API docs for it before, but it was a long time before I hit a use case where I needed to both get and set a computed property. And I think the time that I was doing it is I had a form field that you could either give a voice command and speak to populate the form field, or you could click on the form field and type. But the computed property was kind of reliant upon a whole bunch, like the voice stuff was reliant upon a whole bunch of different things in order to display the results. And so I had to be able to kind of switch between those two different type of input modes.
That is incredibly interesting. Like, yeah, I really want to pick your brain on the whole voice input stuff that you've been doing for like many years at that stage. Because
Yeah,
yeah, it's
it was
pretty.
fun. I wrote Ember apps you could talk to. I still haven't met. There's someone has made add-ons to help people do it using various APIs, and I still haven't ever chatted with someone else who has done it within an Ember app. I mean, it's not wildly different than how you would do it in any other type of JavaScript environment, but the architectural patterns that are available for kind of like organizing and processing the results are really nice.
Sounds really interesting because it's all the rage nowadays, having like Alexa things and whatnot. So like voice interactions in apps are probably going to start spiking, I think.
I think so.
Okay, so I've made some progress here. The I was a little bit I was taking an easy way out. Instead of actually looking up the documentation for the set, I just put in like placeholder attributes and console logged them to see what it gives you. Apparently, when you hit set, it gives you the name of the parameter, the this thing here, full name, and the new value that you're working with, which is interesting.
Hmm.
I don't know why it would send in the property name, which is interesting, but it's cool. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to split the new value that's being passed in on the space. So um, new value dot split on a space. So now the first piece, I hope I spelled pieces correctly. I'm going to set first name to be the first piece. And this dot set last name to be the second piece. And then, if I remember correctly, you have to also return the new value so that it kind of stays updated in the template. So let's try that. So I have
Oh
Chris
no.
Hansen.
Oh, I have to install Bower to run this old app.
Oh
Uh,
no.
no,
Ooh, pro
I don't
tip,
want to. Yeah.
npx bower, because then
Oh.
you don't have to install
Oh
it. It
wait.
just runs it
Wait.
locally.
What if I just do an Ember? I should do a twiddle. I'm gonna do a twiddle. I do not want to mess with Bower at all. So
Uh,
Bower was a package manager, kind of in the same vein as NPM, except the things that it exported were kind of browser ready, is my understanding. Whereas NPM packages have to be kind of, I don't know what's the word, transpiled or whatever, into something that the browser can use because they're generic Node packages for a Node environment, and the things you could do in Node is not the same as the things you could do for browser side code. And Bower was eventually kind of sort of deprecated and underwent a whole bunch of different changes about, its registry URLs and things like that. It was, I should mention too, it's not a Bower was not a special Ember thing. It was something that a lot of apps and frameworks depended on. Um, and over time, it kind of got phased out. And I'm reluctant to try and um, work with it just because you have to change something about I remember this. There's instructions on the website. You have to change something about the registry URLs. It's not hard to do if you're working on, a real app that you actually, you're just trying to upgrade it or something you're resurrecting after a while. But for the sake of example, I think I'm going to try and use something that's already set up.
yeah.
Anyway, carry
Uh,
on.
so I've finished my example. Do you want to see?
Woo, yes.
So are you watching my screen?
Yes, I am.
So the example I was doing before was Chris Manson. Again, I'm not vain. And then you take over the world, Jen Weber. And not only has it not broken the situation, so like it's still computed, it's setting the first name and last name correctly, which means it's updating the inputs as well, which is one of those kind of like early things that helped me fall in love with Ember. This whole like two-way binding thing, even though it's out of vogue now. Inputs are still a place where it's sometimes okay to do two-way binding if you know what you're doing. But yeah, and this is all the code. Um,
Cool.
a getter, a setter, and this is where like the reason why you might want a setter like this is you probably have business logic. Like the getter probably is business logic, so it's combining two things to make a full name, and then you need to do the opposite in your setter. Take the the new value apart and set those two things where they came from. Um, okay, cool. Uh, so
So I'm working on the Ember 2 example here. If you want to maybe put that example in there, or I guess we could take some time after this call to fill in the answer.
um,
Or maybe let's just talk through at least what we would say to this person, because there's a couple different things that are um, going wrong with their example, but also uh, it's it's something that they're likely to be confused about. Like, there's a fair number of concepts here.
yeah. So the first thing, which I didn't even notice the first time I read this, was the thing that you pointed out about they're not using this dot set, which is a big no-no in Ember if you're relying on it. You know what I mean? If you're
Hmm.
using computed properties or whatever, and it's you using an Ember object, you need to use this dot set. So that's probably where I would start my answer here. Um, I would then probably say something about I'm not aware of a change in behavior. between 2x and 3x, but I would then point out the deprecation to say this is going to change. This is like you shouldn't be able to set a computer property um, uh, like they're trying to do here without a setter, and then go into the example. And of course, unless you do find by your experimentation in the 2x Ember, this might work. I suppose it doesn't
Yeah, I'm gonna
matter
have
too
a
much if they're
look.
upgrading.
I can understand, like, it doesn't matter, but in the sense, like, usually you want to understand why.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where uh, if if they're upgrading this may not be the only challenge that they're facing, and so if we can give them some answers, it can kind of just help you feel better about the process of needing to make some refactors. Let's see. This is going to take me a moment still here to
Okay.
pull this up.
So what I'll
Um,
do while you're still doing that, I think you're right. We should probably spend the time writing the answer after the stream because I don't know
okay.
if it's the most exciting thing for people to watch us typing answers in.
All right. Which one do you want to do next? I've got about 20 minutes before I need to run.
Okay, cool. I think I just want to quickly spin up a known Ember app and see if I can do this control click on Internet Explorer
Sure.
because that seems a bit, ooh, postpone. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Um,
I want to just say too about a thing like this. Someone told me that there are Windows developer VMs. I saw this on Twitter for free.
yep.
Um, and
So
I
this
will
is what
put a
I'm using.
link. Very cool. I will put a link here in the chat for our Twitch stream. It has how to get that. So, a good way to test to make sure the things you're building work on Windows. I was chatting with some people as well about, like, if you're an add-on author, making sure that your scripts that you could run with, like, yarn run or npm run work with people who are using Windows machines. If you're doing things manipulating the file paths, for example, you can end up in kind of a bad situation where people who are using Windows can't run your scripts, like tests, lints, even the thing that starts your add-on or app if you're doing something funny with file paths. So it's a good thing to test.
So it's funny that you say that because I literally just fixed um, one of my add-ons, broccoli static site JSON, because the npm test didn't work on Windows because I was just doing something very silly. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what this is doing over here. Rewrite emberjs.com. Right, it's loading, I think. There we go. But yeah, the link that you shared in the chat, I'm actually using one of those VMs to demo right now. It used to have a background, but it's freaking out a little bit. But if you go to modern.ie, that'll bring you to it as well, which is a nice little uh, uh,
Nice.
URL. And then you can download the virtual machines to kind of test things. So you can have IE 8 on Windows 7. I don't know why anybody would want to download IE 8 right now, but if you need to. Okay, so the question that we're trying to figure out here, I have an issue. You click a link to my page with a link to, control and click, it opens a new tab, but the controls go to the next tab in Chrome, whereas in IE, the control stays on the same page. Oh, So that tells me that if I click one of these, oh, interesting.
So, just FYI, I finished the Ember 2 example. I did 218,
Uh-huh.
and I do not see it. It doesn't work to not use set. Like nothing happens at all.
Nothing happens.
So, yeah, I'm a little curious. I'm gonna pull up Ember 212. So this is gonna be an unlikely. Oh, that works. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, back in Ember 212, it doesn't do anything either. That's interesting.
So what did they say? Control. I think the thing that he's actually talking about here is entirely different. We'll talk about that in a second. So you're saying
Anyway,
back in 212, you're saying it just never worked essentially.
yeah, if you skip, I see. So if you skip doing the set, if you don't do this dot set,
Uh-huh.
when you click that button, nothing happens in the UI in the example that we were doing before.
Interesting.
Um, and if you do use set, it works as expected. It'll overwrite, the contents of the computer property. But if you console log this dot full name, like what's the value of this dot full name inside the computed property, it reflects the new thing that you've used equal signs to assign it to. And that makes me think that if they're saying that this works, then maybe they were using their computed property to do some side effecty things. Because if it never shows up in the UI, then like you
Yeah.
must have been using it for a side effect. So
So
to
if you had another
define
action or something that would be
correct,
using it,
correct,
right?
or, or like you were kind of using it as a pseudo observer or something. So in this context, a side effect is um, where you have a computed property. Computed properties are meant for mostly displaying data. They watch the values of different properties of a component or whatever, and update to reflect the new value whenever those other values change. However, it's really tempting to try to chain other behaviors inside of that computed property. So you might say, well, if the computed property fires because some values change, then really I want to set this other value over here and send this action over there. And you can get into kind of a tangled mess pretty quickly, um, because uh, computed properties, because of the conditions where computed properties recalculate, sometimes you don't expect them to recalculate, or you do expect them to recalculate and they don't because you haven't quite internalized when they're running. And so it's a good idea to just have computed properties have one job, which is to watch data and update what's displayed. So,
Yeah, I agree with
sidetrack there.
everything that you said.
Anyway,
It's
carry on.
it it's also, I find, quite useful if you think of that, if you keep that in mind when you're building your application. Not only are you avoiding yourself getting into a tangled mess, as you put it, you're also you're also thinking through what your controller or your component is actually doing. You know what I mean? So you're kind of uh, dovetailed into this, having to think about your business logic up front, which I find very useful personally. Um, okay, cool. Right, so I think we've definitely got enough to answer this first question, and we verified that this has never worked like in previous versions either. And I think you're completely right with the side effectness. Um, the this other person's question isn't Ember related at all in any way, shape, or form. It is it is a Chrome versus IE behavior. So what I understand his question to be is that if we have a look at, I'm here on Chrome. on my local machine, and I do a control click, which in my case is command click. Oh, interesting. It's not even behaving as he puts it. He's saying that when I click a link, control click, it opens in a new tab, but the controls go to the new tab. So it's telling me that he's expecting, or they're expecting it to switch to the new tab.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't happen for me on Chrome.
Oh, in general.
Yeah. So
Oh.
I can't
Oh,
even get that
okay.
first thing for him. But the thing that I was talking about here is that
Interesting.
control clicking. Oh, I didn't control click properly there. It, control click. Oh, let's try that again. Let's do a open a new tab. It's again doing the
Oh
same
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's keeping you where you are, but then it's opening in a new tab. So I don't think this is an Ember related thing at all.
Oh. Yep.
So what do we do here? Should we remove the Ember tag? And also, we should
Um
definitely remove the Ember data tag because it's got nothing
yes,
to
we
do with
should.
Ember data.
We should. So I think we leave the Ember tag because it's although actually I don't know what would be the most what's the most I don't usually fall back to this. What's the most Stack Overflowy way to handle this? I want to like at least know what that would be.
Well, I think you're asking a loaded question.
Oh,
The
well, that's not what I mean. No, what I mean is what I mean is, on one hand, they are asking about Ember things, but on the other hand, its searchability as an Ember thing is like somewhat questionable, but also somewhat not, because plenty of people use Ember apps in Windows. I guess we take off Ember data, leave Ember JS, and answer it with that it's default Windows behavior, and like advise them to try doing the same thing on other websites that are not Ember, and that they'll see this
yeah,
behavior. So like this isn't an Ember problem.
I completely agree, and it looks
Uh,
like we have some chats on the in the stream as well. Lox has joined us. Hello, Lox.
Hi,
He's
Lux.
he's saying that there is a setting in Chrome to go to the new one or not.
Ooh,
So
nice.
that means that it's oh,
Oh, the
is that
most
something
Stack Overflow way is to flag as inappropriate. Oh.
oh God.
Oh, disappointed. Okay. This should be posted to the
He's
user's Stack Overflow.
so he's not wrong. This is not a programming question. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I refuse to kind of accept the Stack Overflow way of doing things because, you know,
Yeah.
we have had a history of this and it's fine. We want to try and improve people's experiences when we're um, interacting with them. I would
Yeah.
I would answer this, but I think we could spin this in a way to say, you know what, Ember's great because actually, if we look at the guides, guides at emberjs.com, the reason why this actually works in an Ember app is because if you look at what we're clicking on here, it's an actual link with an actual href.
Mhm.
So clicking it normally, it doesn't do oh excuse me, it doesn't do a full load, a
Mhm.
full page reload because we're in an Ember app. But because it's a proper href, clicking open a new tab will actually go to the place that you expect because Ember is so uh, root focused. And in a lot
Mhm.
of other JavaScript single page applications, this sort of thing doesn't work. You can't right click to a new tab. So we can answer it as a programmy question, even
Okay.
even if the Stack Overflow way of answering this is to say you shouldn't have asked it in the first place.
Oh, it
It's
makes
so
me sad.
sad.
I mean, like I get it,
Yeah,
but also there's like in higher traffic, uh, like in high traffic areas, like the general JavaScript tag, I could imagine, like, oh, you would have to be by necessity, you'd have to be more strict with it. But
yeah,
anyway, okay. Well, that sounds good. I think the main thing we just have to watch out for here is like we don't confuse this person that they still Ember does anything particularly weird. You know what I mean? Like we should still make it clear that um it's default browser behavior.
yeah. I think you could. There's two ways you could talk about that. You could either say, "Oh, write a HTML only example app or whatever," or turn off JavaScript, and you'll see the exact same
Mhm.
behavior.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
it's not an Ember thing.
Yep. Okay. Well, should we wrap up? Talk about our next steps here?
I think so. We have a bunch more in the queue here. That's fine, but I guess one thing that I would say is that if anybody's finding this stream or when we put it on YouTube useful and they want to kind of contribute and they want to answer some of these Ember questions that aren't getting answers, like we're not really going to be able to make much of a dent in the, oh God, 2000 unanswered Ember questions. Oh my God. uh, and especially if we're only
Oh
doing
no.
like 3 a week or whatever. Um, and uh, every week there's more questions. You know, what we really want to encourage people to do as part of this is to jump in, answer some, and try and help make a dent in that number.
Yep.
So I don't know if
Yeah, and
that's
also
encouraging.
if you even if you're not able to answer a question, but you can go through and upvote other good answers that you find by other people. That I think is something that's very encouraging. Like it's a way to kind of it gives someone this warm fuzzies. So if they're the ones answering questions, maybe they're encouraged to keep answering questions, or they feel good that they like, know that they wrote something. Like that validation is actually really helpful, and as well as it helps good answers float to the top. So when people are googling these things later, they'll come across some of the best and latest content.
Yeah, that's a very good point there as well, because even though we've had our kind of issues with Stack Overflow in the past and we may not agree with everything that they do, there are users that are Googling and they get Stack Overflow results. And if
Mm-hmm.
we don't help them and if we don't upvote the right answers and all this sort of stuff, there's either going to be bad info out there or no info, which is kind of sadder.
Yeah,
So
it's true.
upvoting is definitely helpful.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. Our next live stream is tentatively scheduled for which day? Friday the 10th. And if there are any changes to that, we'll post them on Twitter and the Ember community chat and all that. So, these days are slightly flexible depending on what's going on with the work that Chris and I have to do for other things like, our day jobs. So we'll post about those. So stay tuned and we'll catch you next time.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us. Bye.